I was making a Manhattan when I heard the crash. Not the sound of dropped glassware. I've swept up enough shattered dreams in this bar to know that sound intimately, but the unmistakable thud of a body hitting floor. In the dim amber lighting of Summit Spirits, a blonde woman lay sprawled beside an overturned bar stool, her green eyes wide with embarrassment, not pain. "And my balance is usually much better when I'm hanging off a cliff," she said, lips curving into a smile that made my chest tighten. I set down the cocktail shaker and rounded the bar in 3 quick steps. The scent of her perfume, something earthy with hints of sandalwood, washed over me as I helped her up. Her fingers were calloused but warm against mine. "Do you climb?" I asked, steadying her as Jordan, my boss, shot me a look that said, "Get back behind the bar." "Only when I'm not making spectacular entrances in cocktail bars." And her voice had a husky quality that vibrated somewhere deep in my stomach. "Madison Jones." "And you are?" "To Diana Taylor, resident mixologist and occasional first responder." I gestured toward the fallen stool. "And can I get you something to help forget that happened?" "Something complicated," she said, settling onto the repositioned stool. "Surprise me." I nodded, sliding back behind my fortress of bottles and glassware. This was my domain, the only place in Minneapolis where I felt truly competent anymore. 3 years tending bar had taught me to read people like recipes, and Madison was no simple pour. I reached for the mezcal, smoky, with a bite that lingered. Added blood orange, a splash of Aperol, and a whisper of habanero simple syrup. The ice cracked and protested as I shook the concoction, my movements practiced and fluid. It was the kind of drink I'd make for someone unafraid of intensity. "So, what got you into climbing?" I asked, straining the sunset-colored liquid into a chilled coupe. "And need to fall without breaking." She watched my hands as I expressed a twist of orange peel over the surface. "There's something honest about hanging by your fingertips, no room for lies when gravity wants to kill you." I slid the drink across the polished wood. "Ain't on the house." "For your honesty?" Her eyes met mine as she took the first sip. The moment stretched taut between us, like a rope bearing weight. Outside, rain began to tap against the windows, nature's own nervous fingers drumming. I hadn't felt this kind of pull since... "Perfect," she declared, setting down the glass. "Sweet enough to trick you, then hot enough to make you pay attention." I busied myself wiping down the bar, pretending her words hadn't just described everything I'd been missing. I'll take that as a compliment to my professional skills. "Why, take it however you want," Madison replied, eyes never leaving mine. "But I'm curious what else those hands are good at besides mixing drinks." I dropped the towel. Jordan coughed dramatically from the other end of the bar. The next few hours passed in a blur of other customers, routine orders, and stolen glances. Madison nursed her drink, then another, occasionally checking her phone but never leaving. When last call came, she was one of 3 patrons remaining. "We're closing up," I announced, but my eyes were fixed solely on her. "And no. She slid off her stool and gathered her leather jacket. "And I'll wait outside." I rushed through my closing duties with unprecedented efficiency. Jordan raised an eyebrow but said nothing as I counted out my tips in record time. 20 minutes later, I pushed through the heavy door into the rain-washed night. Madison stood under the awning, scrolling through her phone. When she looked up, the neon sign cast her face in alternating shadows of blue and red. Don't normally wait around for bartenders," she said. "And I don't normally hope customers will." The confession slipped out before I could stop it. She stepped closer. "And I came back to the bar tonight looking for someone who wasn't afraid of falling." Her lips tasted like my cocktail, sweet, then surprising heat. Her hands found my waist with the same confidence they probably found holds on a sheer rock face. I'd spent 3 years mixing other people's happiness while mine evaporated like cheap vermouth. But here, with rain drumming against the awning and Madison's mouth on mine, I felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. I pulled back just enough to whisper, "Why me?" Madison's smile held a shadow I couldn't decipher. "Because your hands were steady even when your eyes weren't." Little did I know then that 6 months later, those same steady hands would be gripping a steering wheel in terror as our car spun across black ice, and those green eyes would look at me without a trace of recognition. "And you're kidding me." I stood staring at the towering wall of multicolored plastic holds stretching 30 feet upward. Madison had texted me the address to Vertical Ventures 3 days after our kiss outside Summit Spirits, and like a fool, I'd agreed without asking what exactly I was agreeing to. It's just a beginner's wall. Madison grinned, already harnessed up and looking unfairly attractive in form-fitting climbing pants. Most people conquer it on their first day. But most people aren't terrified of heights. I ran a finger along one of the ropes, feigning casual interest while my stomach performed Olympic-level gymnastics. That's exactly why you need to try it. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Fear only has power when you run from it. The climbing gym buzzed with activity, muscled enthusiasts scaling walls like it was nothing, the soft thud of bodies landing on crash pads, chalk dust hanging in the air. I felt painfully out of place in my borrowed gear. "I mix drinks for a living," I said. My feet belong firmly on the ground. Madison brushed chalk from her hands, leaving ghostly prints on her black pants. "Trust me, Diana. Once you get up there, something changes. You see everything differently." A week ago, I would have politely declined and retreated to my comfortable routine. But there was something about Madison that made me want to be braver, or at least appear that way. I sighed and extended my arm so she could help me into the harness. "And if I die, Jordan gets all my top-shelf bourbon," I muttered. Her fingers worked efficiently at the straps around my thighs, tightening and adjusting. Even through this utilitarian contact, my skin warmed beneath her touch. She guided me through a crash course in climbing basics, how to tie in, commands to use, the proper way to fall. "Remember," she said, now serious. "I've got you. I won't let you fall." I approached the wall, heart pounding in my ears. The first few holds weren't so bad. Barely off the ground, I could pretend this was just an elaborate game of Twister. But as I climbed higher, my breathing shortened. 10 feet up, my arms began to quiver. "Hey, I can't," I called down, fingers cramping around a blue hold shaped like half a donut. "And you can," Madison countered, her voice steady. "Look at the green hold by your right knee, shift your weight there. If I move, I'll fall. So fall. I've got you." I glanced down. Mistake. The ground seemed impossibly far away, though rationally I knew it wasn't. Madison stood below, rope in hand, eyes locked on mine. The harness bit into my thighs, a constant reminder of safety I couldn't quite believe in. "Diana," she called. "Why did you come here today?" The question caught me off guard. "Because you asked me to..." "No, the real reason." My fingers ached. Sweat trickled down my back. "Because I wanted to see you again." "Then don't look down. Look at me." I did. Despite the distance, I could see the intensity in her green eyes. "Now, reach for the next hold." Something in her voice bypassed my fear. I stretched upward, fingers finding purchase on the next hold, then another, and another. Each move revealed a new path, a puzzle my body was solving without my mind's permission. Before I realized it, I was 3/4 up the wall. "So, holy shit," I breathed. "Keep going." Madison's encouragement floated up. "Oh, you're doing it." When my hand finally slapped the top of the wall, triumph surged through me like a shot of expensive whiskey. I'd done it. The descent was easier, Madison lowering me slowly, until my feet touched solid ground, and my knees nearly buckled with relief. She unclipped me from the rope, her smile radiant. "How do you feel?" "Like I might throw up," I laughed shakily. "But also, amazing. That's the feeling I live for." Her hands lingered on the harness buckles, one inch in the edge between terror and exhilaration. Later, perched on stools at a tiny bar across from the gym, we clinked glasses of local IPA. My muscles ached pleasantly, and something had shifted between us. The conversation flowed easily, about her job designing outdoor gear, my abandoned dreams of culinary school, the places we'd lived before Minneapolis. "So, why bartending?" she asked, fingers tracing condensation on her glass. "It was supposed to be temporary. Then temporary became familiar, and familiar became safe." Madison nodded. "And safe became stuck?" The accuracy stung. "Something like that." "Want yet you climbed that wall today." Her eyes held mine. "Doesn't seem like someone who's stuck." The bar was dim, quieter than Summit Spirits. In this gentle light, Madison looked softer. the daring climber transformed into someone more vulnerable. Maybe I just needed the right person to dare me, I said. She leaned forward then, one hand coming to rest on my knee. Oh, I'd like to dare you to do something else. What's that? Rather than answer, she closed the distance between us. This kiss was different from our first. Unhurried, deliberate, tasting of hops and possibility. Her hand slid up to cut my face, thumb stroking my cheekbone as if memorizing its shape. When we parted, I felt dizzy in a way that had nothing to do with heights. Dinner tomorrow? She asked, her breath warm against my lips. I nodded, already falling faster than any safety rope could catch. I woke to the soft tickle of blonde hair against my cheek, and the gentle weight of Madison's arm draped across my waist. Her bedroom was bathed in the pale blue light of early morning, shadows dancing on the wall as snow fell outside. 3 months in, and I still couldn't believe this was real, that I could reach out and touch her, that she was mine. The first snow of December transformed Minneapolis into a hushed wonderland. I carefully untangled myself and padded to the window, wrapping her discarded flannel around my shoulders. The city was disappearing under a blanket of white, cars already half buried along the street. Come back to bed, Madison murmured, her voice husky with sleep. It's too damn cold without you. I turned to find her watching me, hair tousled, eyes heavy-lidded. My heart stuttered in my chest the way it always did when she looked at me like that. It's snowing, I said unnecessarily. More reason to stay right here. She patted the warm spot I'd vacated. I crawled back under the covers, my cold feet making her yelp when they touched her legs. She retaliated by tickling my ribs until I surrendered, breathless with laughter. Coffee? I offered once she'd declared victory. Later. Her hand slipped beneath my borrowed shirt, tracing patterns that made my breath catch. Much later. Outside, the snow fell harder. Weather alerts pinged on our phones, blizzard warnings, roads closing, everything shutting down. The world beyond her apartment ceased to exist as Madison's lips found the sensitive spot below my ear. Tell me something you've never told anyone, she whispered, her breath hot against my skin. I closed my eyes. I'm scared of how much I want this to last. Her movements paused, and I worried I'd said too much. We'd been careful so far, treating what we had like a delicate climbing route, testing each hold before putting weight on it. Madison propped herself up on one elbow, her face serious. I'm not going anywhere, Diana. Her hands resumed their exploration, more deliberate now. She knew my body better than anyone ever had, which touches made me gasp, which made me beg. The storm outside intensified as we moved together, and I surrendered to the feeling of being truly seen. Hours later, tangled in sheets with takeout containers littering the bedside table, we watched the blizzard through the window. The howling wind rattled the glass as Madison traced lazy circles on my bare shoulder. My parents don't know, she said suddenly. Oh, out. Us? I shifted to see her face. She nodded. And I think Paige and I are just close sisters who both happen to be single. They've never handled change well. Do you want them to know? Madison sighed. Yes, no. I don't know. They're old-school Catholics from northern Minnesota. My dad still thinks being gay is a lifestyle choice. I nodded, understanding all too well. My own coming out had cost me relationships I'd thought unbreakable. Paige knows, though, Madison continued. She's been my keeper since we were kids. The mention of her sister made me tense slightly. I'd only met Paige once, briefly, at a climbing competition. She'd sized me up with cool efficiency, her protective nature evident in every question she'd asked. Does she approve? Of us? I tried to keep my voice casual. Madison laughed. Oh, Paige doesn't approve of anyone I date. Part of her job description as big sister. A knock at the door interrupted us. Madison groaned, pulling the blanket over her head. Ignore it, she mumbled. The knocking came again, more insistent. It's probably Mrs. Gunderson from next door, I said. Her power might be out. Madison sighed dramatically, but reached for her robe. Hold that thought. I listened as she padded to the door, then heard the unmistakable voice of her sister. Surprise, I brought emergency supplies since you never— Oh, you're not alone. I gathered the sheet around me just as Paige appeared in the bedroom doorway behind Madison. Her eyes narrowed slightly when they landed on me. Diana, right? The bartender? Nice to see you again, I managed, clutching the sheet tighter. Paige smiled thinly. And since I brought provisions, the roads are a disaster. They're saying we might be stuck for days. Madison shot me an apologetic look. Thanks, sis. That's thoughtful. 3 hours and 2 bottles of wine later, Madison had fallen asleep on the couch. I was washing dishes when Paige cornered me in the kitchen. She falls hard, she said without preamble. Paige always has. I kept my eyes on the plate I was scrubbing. Is this the hurt her and I'll kill you speech? No, it's the she'll be fine when it's over speech. Paige's voice was matter of fact, and Madison has a pattern. Intense relationship, total immersion, then burnout. I just want you to know she'll recover. The plate nearly slipped from my hands. We're doing fine, actually. And sure it feels that way now. Paige smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just, when you leave, don't ghost her. She deserves a clean break. Before I could respond, Madison appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep. What are you two conspiring about? She asked, voice warm with affection. Just getting to know Diana better? Paige answered smoothly. Madison wrapped her arms around me from behind, pressing a kiss to my neck. Dude. Because she's not going anywhere anytime soon. I leaned back into her embrace, meeting Paige's skeptical gaze over the rim of my wineglass. The storm raged outside, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the only tempest brewing. 6 months, half a year of waking up next to Madison, of learning her habits and quirks, of building something I'd stopped believing was possible. Our anniversary fell on a Wednesday, not exactly optimal for celebration, but I'd requested the night off from Jordan weeks ago. "So you sure you don't want me to cancel my shift tomorrow?" Madison asked, sprawled across my couch while I bustled around my apartment, hiding evidence of my surprise. "And we could make a whole 24 hours of it." Absolutely not. Auntie and I shooed her away from the kitchen where I'd stashed the special bottle of mezcal I'd been saving. "And your team needs you for that sales pitch. Besides, I'm working tomorrow night anyway." She pouted dramatically. "Fine. But tonight better blow my mind." If only she knew. The small velvet box hidden in my sock drawer wasn't a ring. We weren't there yet. But the vintage climbing carabiner I'd found at an antique shop, engraved with our initials and the date of our first climb together. It was sentimental without being overwhelming. A perfect balance for where we stood. "Just be ready at 7, I said, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "And wear something nice." I'd made reservations at Spoon and Stable, called in every favor I had with local bartender friends to secure the best table. The weather forecast had mentioned freezing rain, but nothing serious enough to cancel our plans. At 6:45, I was dressed in the one good dress I owned, a deep blue number that Madison had once said brought out my eyes, when my phone rang. "Hey," Madison's voice sounded stressed. "And running late. Client call went long. Can we push dinner back an hour?" I glanced at my watch. Then might not hold our reservation. "Damn. I'm sorry. We could do somewhere else?" I thought of the carabiner, the speech I'd rehearsed, the special night I'd planned. "No. I'll call them, see if they can accommodate us. Just get here when you can." By the time Madison arrived, flustered and apologetic, icy rain was tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. She looked stunning in a simple black dress I'd never seen before, hair pulled back to reveal the elegant line of her neck. "You look beautiful," I said, momentarily forgetting my frustration. She pulled me close. "So do you. I'm sorry about the delay." The restaurant held our table, though not without making their displeasure known. The meal was everything I'd hoped. Perfect food, attentive service, Madison's face glowing in the candlelight as she told stories about her day. The box burned a hole in my clutch as I waited for the right moment. "So remember our first climb?" I asked as dessert arrived. Madison smiled, reaching for my hand across the table. "How could I forget? You were terrified." And I was. "But you made me feel safe enough to be scared." Her thumb traced circles on my palm. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. This was it, the moment. I reached for my clutch. "Diana, there's something..." "Uh, and I have something for you." We both spoke at once, then laughed. "Want you first," I said. Madison took a deep breath. "I got offered a position, leading climbs in Yosemite for 6 months." My hand froze on my bag. Yosemite? As in California? "It's an incredible opportunity, working with the best climbers in the country." Her eyes shone with excitement, but I could see the worry there too. "We could make it work. You could visit. I'd come back when..." "When did you find out?" The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. 3 weeks ago. She had the grace to look guilty. "I wanted to be sure before I told you." 3 weeks. While I'd been planning our anniversary, she'd been planning her exit. "And you're going." It wasn't a question. "And so I want to discuss it with you. It's not final yet." But I could see in her eyes that it was. The carabiner in my bag felt like a joke now. "We should go," I said, signaling for the check. "It's getting late." The drive home was tense, the freezing rain now falling in earnest. Windshield wipers struggled to keep up as we navigated slick streets in silence. Madison tried several times to restart the conversation, but I couldn't find words that weren't bitter. "Diana, please talk to me," she finally said as we hit the highway. "This doesn't have to change us." 6 months on opposite sides of the country wouldn't change us? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "And you've known for weeks and chose tonight to tell me." "So I was trying to find the right time." "And our anniversary dinner was the right time?" The speedometer crept up as my emotions got the better of me. "Diana, slow down," Madison warned. "When the roads are..." I never saw the patch of black ice. One moment we were arguing, the next we were spinning. The world became a blur of headlights and rain and Madison's scream. Metal crunched. Glass shattered. The airbag exploded in my face with the force of a punch. Then silence. Horrible, consuming silence. I turned my head, pain shooting down my neck. Madison hung limply against her seat bag, a thin line of blood tracing its way down her temple. "Madison?" My voice was a rasp. "Maddie?" No response. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands, somehow managed to dial 911. The operator's voice seemed to come from miles away as I stared at Madison's still form. "Please state your emergency." "Accident," I choked out. "Highway 35. My girlfriend. She's not moving." The wait for the ambulance was endless. I kept talking to Madison, begging her to wake up, to be okay, but she remained unresponsive. When the paramedics finally arrived, they had to pry my fingers from her hand to load her onto a stretcher. "They need to be checked too, ma'am," one told me, but I pushed him away. "I'm fine. Help her." At the hospital, they separated us. I was assessed, treated for minor injuries, and released within hours. But Madison was rushed into surgery, and no one would tell me anything because I wasn't family. I paced the waiting room all night, ignoring the pain in my ribs, calling Paige repeatedly until she finally answered and rushed to the hospital. When she arrived, her face was ashen, but her eyes burned with accusation when they landed on me. "What happened?" she demanded. "In black ice," I said numbly. "And we were arguing and I didn't see..." Paige held up a hand, silencing me. "And save it. I need to find her doctor." Left alone in the sterile waiting room, I clutched the velvet box I'd somehow remembered to grab from the wrecked car. Inside, the carabiner gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Our initials a promise I wasn't sure I'd get to keep. 3 days passed before they allowed me to see her. 3 days of sleeping in uncomfortable waiting room chairs, of washing my face in hospital bathrooms, of Paige giving me updates with clinical detachment. Madison had suffered a severe concussion and required surgery to relieve pressure on her brain. She was stable now, finally awake. "So she's disoriented," the doctor warned before I entered her room. "That's normal after this kind of trauma. Don't overwhelm her." I nodded, hand clutching the small stuffed mountain goat I'd bought in the gift shop, a reference to her climbing obsession that I hoped might make her smile. Nothing prepared me for the sight of Madison in that hospital bed. Her vibrant presence diminished by tubes and monitors, a bandage wrapped around her head where they'd shaved part of her blonde hair. Her eyes were closed when I entered, and for a moment I thought she was asleep. "Madison?" I whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, those familiar green irises finding me. I waited for recognition, for relief, for anything resembling the woman who'd shared my bed for 6 months. "Hello?" she said politely. I stepped closer. "Hey there, climber girl. You gave us quite a scare." Her brow furrowed slightly. "I'm sorry, do I know you? Do I know you?" 5 words. 5 simple words that cracked the floor beneath my feet. "It's me," I said, voice shaking. "Diana." She studied my face with the careful attention one might give a stranger on a bus. I'm sorry, I don't remember you." I sank into the chair beside her bed, the stuffed goat crushed in my grip. "We've been dating for 6 months. I was with you in the car when—" "NT accident," she finished. "Bounce told me there was an accident." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay in here?" Madison's eyes darted to her, relief evident. Could you get my sister, please?" The nurse nodded, giving me a sympathetic look before disappearing. I reached for Madison's hand, but she pulled away, her movement instinctive and devastating. "I'm sorry," she said again. "This must be difficult for you." Difficult didn't begin to cover the yawning chasm opening inside me. Before I could respond, Paige swept into the room, bringing with her a wave of authoritative energy. Maddie, you're awake." She moved to the bed, pointedly positioning herself between us. "How are you feeling?" "Confused," Madison admitted. "This woman says we're together?" Paige shot me a look I couldn't decipher before turning back to her sister. "Yes. Diana is your girlfriend. You don't remember her at all?" Madison shook her head slowly, then winced at the movement. "The last thing I clearly remember is getting the job offer from Vertical Ventures, moving to Minneapolis." Her voice was small. "It was over a year ago, wasn't it?" The doctor had mentioned memory loss as a possibility, but hearing it confirmed made it horrifyingly real. Madison remembered her life before me, her job, her sister, her friends, but the 6 months we'd spent building our relationship had vanished like footprints in fresh snow. "A doctor says it might come back," I said, trying to sound hopeful. "And if not, we can create new memories." Madison looked uncomfortable. I'm sure you're very nice, but this is a lot." Paige squeezed her sister's shoulder. "Oh, you don't have to figure everything out right now. Focus on getting better." I stayed for another painful hour, trying to navigate this new reality where the woman I loved looked at me like a stranger. I showed her pictures on my phone, us at the climbing gym, at a lakeside cabin we'd rented in October, dressed up for Halloween as rock climbers from the 1972nd, complete with vintage gear and ridiculous mustaches. She smiled politely at each one, but there was no flash of recognition, no, "Oh, now I remember." When visiting hours ended, Paige followed me into the hallway. "This is hard for everyone," she said, her tone softer than it had been since the accident. "And a doctor say pushing too hard could make things worse. So what am I supposed to do? Just pretend the last 6 months never happened?" Paige sighed. "Maybe give her some space. Let her heal. She's overwhelmed." "And if she never remembers?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. "And that's her reality now," Paige said finally. "And you'll have to respect that." I returned to my apartment, our apartment really, though Madison had kept her own place, and faced the evidence of a relationship that now existed only in my memory. Her climbing shoes by the door, her favorite mug in the dish rack, her moisturizer on my bathroom counter. For the next week, I visited daily, each time hoping for a miracle. Madison was unfailingly polite, even curious about our relationship, but she treated my stories like interesting fiction, events that had happened to someone else. The doctors remained cautiously optimistic, but I could see the pity in their eyes. On the day Madison was discharged, I arrived with flowers only to find her room empty, the bed already stripped for the next patient. She left about an hour ago, a nurse informed me, with her sister. Paige wasn't answering my calls, so I drove straight to Madison's apartment. The lights were on, and 2 figures moved behind the curtains. I knocked, heart pounding. Paige opened the door, blocking the entrance. "Now isn't a good time." "I just want to see her," I pleaded. "Make sure she's settling in okay." Diana. Paige's voice was firm but not unkind. Madison needs stability right now, familiar things, people she remembers. And I could help. I could. And you're a stranger to her. The words were brutal in their truth. And stranger who expects intimacy, shared history. It's confusing for her. Behind Paige, Madison appeared, looking pale but determinedly upright. And, it's okay, she told her sister. Let her in. Paige reluctantly stepped aside. Madison's apartment looked the same yet felt different. The climbing awards still hung on the walls, but photos of us had been removed. I wondered if they were packed away or simply discarded. I'm sorry about all this, Madison said, gesturing vaguely at her head. It must be frustrating. Don't apologize. None of this is your fault. An awkward silence stretched between us, the first we'd ever experienced. The woman before me was Madison, but not my Madison, the physical shell without the shared experiences that had shaped us. Paige thinks, she began hesitantly. Paige thinks I should give you space, I finished. Madison nodded. Just until I feel more oriented. The doctors say pushing too hard could make the recovery harder. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. For months, I'd worried about Madison leaving for California. Now she was physically here but gone in every way that mattered. I understand, I said, though I didn't. If you ever want to talk, or have questions, or just anything, I'm here. As I turned to leave, Madison called out, Diana, what were we arguing about, in the car? I paused, hand on the doorknob. Sig got a job offer. In California. 6 months in Yosemite. And I was going to take it? I looked back at her, at the genuine curiosity in those green eyes that had once known every part of me. Change, I think you were. Yes. 3 weeks passed with no word from Madison. I immersed myself in work, taking extra shifts at Summit Spirits to fill the hollow spaces in my days. Jordan noticed but didn't pry, just slid me the better tipping customers, and occasionally placed a supportive hand on my shoulder when I'd been staring too long at nothing. It was a Tuesday night, typically slow, the bar half empty, when I looked up from mixing a Manhattan and saw her. Madison stood just inside the entrance, scanning the room with an uncertainty I'd never associated with her. She wore a simple blue sweater that brought out her eyes, her hair longer than I remembered. The scar near her temple was barely visible now. I nearly fumbled the cocktail shaker. "So you okay?" Jordan asked, following my gaze. I see." Madison spotted me and offered a tentative smile as she approached the bar. I set the completed Manhattan in front of its rightful owner and wiped my suddenly damp palms on a bar towel. "Hi," she said. One syllable shouldn't have the power to make my heart race. "Ty. This is unexpected." Sentai was in the neighborhood. She settled onto a bar stool, her fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the bar top. "Actually, that's not true. I came here looking for you." Hope, dangerous, unwelcome hope, flickered in my chest. "Can I get you something? On the house?" "Surprise me." She paused. "That's what I said the first time, isn't it? When we met?" I stilled. "You remember that?" "No," Paige told me. Madison's smile was apologetic. "She's been filling in some gaps." The hope dimmed but didn't extinguish. I busied myself crafting the same cocktail I'd made her that first night. Mezcal, blood orange, Aperol, habanero syrup. Muscle memory guided my hands while my mind raced. Why was she here? What did she want? I slid the drink across to her, watching as she took a cautious sip. "Wow." Her eyes widened. "That's intense. Good, but it sneaks up on you." "Just like the first time," I said softly. Madison traced the rim of her glass. "I've been having these, I don't know what to call them. Not quite memories. Feelings, maybe. Moments of familiarity without context." I leaned forward. "Like what?" "And I went climbing last week. First time since the accident. Nothing difficult, just basics. But when I touched the wall, I had this flash of emotion. Like excitement mixed with anxiety that wasn't just about climbing." She took another sip. "Paige said that's how we got close. You started climbing because of me." "Indeed." I smiled at the memory. And then I was terrified. Still am, honestly. "But you made it worth it." Madison studied me with curious eyes. What was I like? With you? The question caught me off guard. Few were vibrant, fearless, except about small things like spiders. You'd scale a sheer cliff face but scream if you found one in the shower. That drew a laugh from her. The familiar sound tugged at something deep inside me. And you refuse to eat raisins, I continued. I called them sad, deflated grapes. You sleep on your left side. You hum when you brush your teeth. Always the same tune, but I never figured out what song it was. Sounds like we have never been apart, she said automatically. It was my mom's favorite. Our eyes met in mutual surprise. Would you? I hesitated, afraid to push too hard. Would you want to try climbing again? With me? We could start fresh. No pressure. Madison considered this. Tonight like that. Actually, that's partly why I came. I feel like I should explore these gaps. See if anything comes back. Jordan appeared behind me. And Stowe, he said quietly. I've got the bar covered. It's dead anyway. 20 minutes later, we stood outside Vertical Ventures. It was closed for the night, but I still had the spare key Alex, our mutual friend from the gym, had given me when I'd briefly considered a part-time job there. Sis is probably breaking several rules, Madison commented as I unlocked the door. Definitely. But Alex won't mind. He's been worried about you too. The empty climbing gym had an eerie quality, the towering walls, silent sentinels, and the dim emergency lighting. I switched on just enough lights for safety without making our trespassing obvious from outside. Madison moved through the space with growing confidence, trailing her fingers along the walls. And I remember this place, not us here, just the place itself. I watched as she expertly checked a harness, her movements fluid despite the weeks away. Some things it seemed were too deeply ingrained to be forgotten. Then do you want to try? I asked, nodding toward the beginner wall, the same one I'd first climbed under her guidance. She surprised me by shaking her head. Not yet. Can we just talk? I have questions. About us? We sat on the crash mats, backs against the wall. Madison kept a careful distance between us, but her body was angled toward mine, an unconscious gesture of openness that gave me hope. Were we happy? She asked. Before the accident? I considered lying, presenting only our best moments, but she deserved the truth. Mostly. We had our issues. You were restless sometimes. I was scared of changes. Then Teen California job. Yes. I looked down at my hands. When you wanted adventure, I wanted security. Madison nodded slowly. It sounds like me. At least the me I remember. And you were excited about the opportunity, I continued. And I was afraid of losing you. Classic impasse. And then I lost myself anyway. Her laugh held no humor. Ironic. We sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of what we'd lost hanging between us. You know what's strange? Madison finally said. Enid, I don't remember you, but I feel comfortable with you. Like my body remembers even if my mind doesn't. Those words, so simple, yet they cracked something open inside me. Before I could respond, Madison stood and moved toward the climbing wall. Actually, I think I do want to climb. Just a little. I followed, helping her into the harness though she clearly didn't need the assistance. Our fingers brushed and neither of us pulled away immediately. I'll spot you, I offered, taking hold of the rope. Madison placed her hands on the first holds, looking up at the wall with determination. In that moment, I glimpsed the woman I'd fallen for, brave and undaunted, even when facing the unknown. Do you recognize this one? I asked, carefully sliding the photograph across the coffee table. Madison and I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the physical evidence of our relationship, photo albums, ticket stubs, birthday cards she'd given me with handwritten notes I now knew by heart. 2 weeks had passed since our night at the climbing gym. 2 weeks of cautious reconnection, of Madison reaching out with texts that grew increasingly comfortable, of coffee meetings that stretched into dinners. We were building something new on the ruins of what we'd had, a fragile structure I was afraid to examine too closely. Madison picked up the photo, the two of us atop Eagle Mountain last fall, windswept and triumphant after hiking all day. And I remember the place, she said, tracing the outline of the landscape. Not us being there together, but I've hiked it before. This had become our pattern. Madison would recognize locations, activities, sometimes even outfits she'd worn, but never the moments we'd shared in them. It was like watching someone assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And practically dragged me up that last mile, I told her. And I was complaining about my blisters and you said, pain is just weakness leaving the body? Madison finished, then looked startled at her own words. I sat up straighter. Yes. Exactly that. She shook her head, frustrated. I don't remember saying it to you. I just know it's something I would say. I tried not to let my disappointment show as I reached for another photo, this one from the Halloween party where we'd gone as vintage climbers. Madison studied it with the same careful attention she gave all the others. I look happy, she observed. We both were. I hesitated, then added, that was the night you first told me you loved me. Madison set the photo down gently. I wish I could remember that. The words hung between us, heavy with all they didn't say. I'd been careful not to pressure her, to let her set the pace of our reconnection. But each blank look, each apologetic smile when I referenced a shared experience, chipped away at my hope. It's getting late, Madison said, glancing at her watch. And should probably go. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. I'll drive you. No need. I can call a ride. The distance she maintained, physical and emotional, was deliberate. I understood it, respected it even, but it didn't make it hurt any less. As I walked her to the door, Madison paused, her hand on the knob. I'm trying, Diana, I really am. No. I resisted the urge to touch her. And there's no rulebook for this. We're both doing our best. After she left, I sat among the scattered memories, fighting the familiar ache of loss. The Madison who was slowly becoming my friend again was wonderful, still brave, still witty, still passionate about the things she loved. But she wasn't the woman who had known every corner of my heart. My phone buzzed with a text, just as I was putting the photos away. Madison, thank you for tonight. Same time Thursday? I typed back quickly, absolutely. 3 days later, we met at the climbing gym during regular hours. Madison had been steadily regaining her strength and confidence on the walls. I watched from below as she navigated a challenging route, her movements decisive and fluid. She's almost back to her old form, Alex commented, appearing beside me. It's amazing considering... Almost? I agreed. Madison descended, face flushed with exertion and triumph. Did you see that crimpy section? I wasn't sure I'd make it. Never doubted you for a second, I said honestly. The easy camaraderie between us felt simultaneously right and wrong, like wearing clothes that fit perfectly, but in a style you'd never choose. Later, as we were leaving, Madison suddenly stopped walking. I need to show you something. She led me to her car and pulled out a notebook from the glove compartment. And I've been having dreams, vivid ones. My therapist suggested I write them down. She handed me the notebook, open to a page covered in her familiar handwriting. As I read, my breath caught. I'm on a wall, climbing. Someone below is calling encouragement. I can't see their face, but I feel safe. There's snow outside the windows. We're alone in the gym. I reach the top and look down, and there's this overwhelming feeling of connection. I looked up from the page. It happened. 3 days before Christmas. You convinced Alex to let us in after hours because I wanted to practice without an audience. It was snowing so hard we almost got stuck there overnight. Madison's expression was unreadable. There's more. She flipped the page. This entry was from 2 nights ago, and dream of being in someone's kitchen, making pasta, flour everywhere, laughing, kissing. The person has dark hair. I feel like I know them, but when I try to focus on their face, it blurs. But the feeling is so real, like coming home. My heart hammered against my ribs. Your birthday, I said softly. So you wanted homemade pasta, but neither of us knew what we were doing. We ended up ordering pizza at midnight, covered in flour. Madison took the notebook back, her fingers trembling slightly. These aren't memories, just dreams. But they feel different from regular dreams. More like echoes, I supplied. She nodded. When a doctor said this might happen, that memory exists in different forms, different parts of the brain. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and see if her body remembered mine the way it seemed to remember other things. Instead, I stood perfectly still, afraid to disrupt whatever delicate process was unfolding. "Would you?" Madison seemed unusually hesitant. "Would you stay over tonight? At my place?" The request caught me completely off guard. "Madison." "Not like that," she clarified quickly. I have this theory that being around you more might trigger more of these dream memories. And if I wake up from one, I could write it down immediately, with you there to confirm if it really happened." It was a clinical approach, almost experimental, but it was also the first time she'd invited me into her space since the accident. "Of course," I said. "Whatever might help." That night, I lay awake on Madison's couch, listening to her breathing in the bedroom, separated by a door that had once never been closed between us. This strange limbo, not quite strangers, not quite lovers, was its own kind of torture. But as I finally drifted off, I held on to one fragile truth. She was dreaming of me, even if she didn't know it was me. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by Madison calling my name, not in fear or confusion, but with the urgent intimacy of someone reaching through darkness for someone they know is there. "Diana, I need to talk to you." Madison's voice was steady but held an undercurrent of tension I'd become attuned to over the past weeks. We were sitting at a quiet corner table in Summit Spirits, me on my night off, Madison nursing a beer across from me. 2 months had passed since the night she'd called my name in the darkness. 2 months of careful rebuilding, of Madison's dream journal growing thicker with fragments of our past together. Some verified memories, others impossible to confirm. Private moments that only she would know had happened. I set down my glass. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, exactly." She fidgeted with her beer label. "Oh, I just need to know something. Have you been holding back about us?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Paige said something yesterday, that there were parts of our relationship you weren't telling me about. Problems we had." Of course Paige would do this. After all our progress, after Madison had started staying at my place some nights, after we'd even tentatively kissed last week, a gentle, questioning kiss that felt both familiar and brand new. "And I've tried to be honest," I said carefully. "We weren't perfect. No couple is." Madison leaned forward. "Since she specifically mentioned something about trust issues, that you kept things from me." My chest tightened. I knew exactly what Paige was referring to, the job offer I'd received last year from a high-end cocktail bar in Chicago. I'd considered it seriously, even interviewed, before deciding to stay in Minneapolis. I hadn't told Madison about it until after I'd declined. "Then there was a job opportunity," I admitted, "in Chicago. I didn't tell you I was considering it until after I'd decided to stay." "Why?" "Because I was afraid you'd encourage me to take it. And I wanted to stay. For you." Madison absorbed this, her expression unreadable. "What else?" "Madison." "No." Her voice hardened. "So I need the whole truth. I'm trying to piece together who we were, and I can't do that with a sanitized version." She was right. In my fear of losing her again, I'd been presenting only our best moments, editing out the harder parts of our story. "When we fought about time," I said finally. "I thought I worked too many nights. I thought you were too focused on climbing. We both got jealous sometimes. You didn't like how close I am to Jordan. I worried about how often you texted your ex." Each admission felt like peeling back a protective layer, exposing the real relationship we'd had. Beautiful but flawed, like all meaningful connections. Madison nodded slowly. "Thank you. For being honest. Does this change things? Between us now?" She considered the question. "I need some time to think, alone." The following day, Madison texted asking me to meet her at Eagle Mountain, the hiking spot from the photo I'd shown her. The request was strange enough that I felt anxiety building during the entire drive. When I arrived at the trailhead, Madison was already there, dressed for hiking, a determined set to her jaw. "We're climbing to the top," she announced without preamble. "That's a 4-hour hike." "Then we better get started." We walked in silence for the first hour, the spring woods coming alive around us. I wanted desperately to ask why we were here, what this meant, but something in Madison's focused expression kept me quiet. Halfway up, she finally spoke. I've been trying too hard to be who I was. What do you mean? She paused, gazing out at the vista beginning to reveal itself. I keep thinking if I just remember enough, I'll become the Madison from before. The one you loved. The one who loved you. Madison? And let me finish. She took a deep breath. I'm not that person anymore. Even if every memory came back, I've been changed by losing them. By having to relearn my own life. My heart sank. This sounded like goodbye. But, she continued, I think that might be okay. We resumed walking, the path growing steeper. Madison moved with confidence, occasionally reaching back to offer me a hand over more difficult sections. When we finally reached the summit, the same spot where we'd taken that photo last fall, Madison turned to face me, wind whipping her blonde hair around her face. So brought you here because this is where we first said we loved each other, she said. I stared at her in shock. You remember that? No, Paige told me. After our talk yesterday, I called her, made her tell me everything she knew about us, the good and the bad. And? Madison stepped closer, and I realized that whether I remember or not, I'm falling in love with you now, the new you, the one who's been patient and honest and brave, the one who's let me find my way back at my own pace. My breath caught in my throat. Madison? I don't know if I'll ever get all my memories back, she said, taking my hands in hers. But I'm not sure it matters anymore. What we had before led us to who we are now. And I like who we are now. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Are you saying... I'm saying I want to create new memories, with you. Stop living in the shadow of what we lost. The peak of Eagle Mountain had always been windy, but in that moment, everything seemed to still. Madison's eyes, those familiar green eyes that had once known me so well and were now learning me anew, held mine with certainty. And might never remember our first kiss, she said. But I'll remember this one. She cupped my face in her hands and pressed her lips to mine. Unlike our hesitant kisses of recent weeks, this one held promise rather than question. I wrapped my arms around her waist, drawing her closer, feeling the solid reality of her body against mine. When we parted, Madison rested her forehead against mine. A memory is strange, she murmured. So don't remember meeting you at the bar or climbing with you the first time. But somehow, my body remembers how perfectly we fit together. In my pocket was the carabiner I'd meant to give her 6 months ago, on our anniversary. I'd carried it every day since the accident, a talisman of what we'd lost. Now I took it out and pressed it into her palm. What's this? She asked, examining the engraving. A reminder that some connections can't be broken, I said. Even by forgetting. Madison closed her fingers around it, a smile spreading across her face. Kay, I have something for you too. From her backpack she pulled out her dream journal, pages now dog-eared and worn from constant use. When the first page is from before the accident, she said. She saw the only entry I wrote before everything changed. I opened it with trembling hands and read, I'm scared to leave for California. Scared of what it means for us. But more scared that if I stay, I'll regret not taking the chance. Diana deserves someone who's all in. I need to figure out if that's me. Looking up, I found Madison watching me intently. And I don't remember writing it, she said. But I understand the person who did. She was afraid of making the wrong choice. And now? I hardly dared to ask. Madison gestured to the vast landscape spread before us. Now I know there are worse things than making the wrong choice. Like not making one at all. As we descended the mountain, hand in hand, I realized that our story hadn't ended with the crash. It had simply turned a page to a new chapter, one we were writing together, word by careful word, memory by new memory.